Okay, so the next thing I'm going to teach you about are shape and line groups. This is a way to take really complex shapes and break it down into simple shapes, and if you can't break it down into shapes, break it down into lines, so that you can work on getting your proportion and placement correct. I like to use this technique when I'm doing gesture drawings, which is another video that I have you can take a look at, but I also like to use it at the start of complex problems and projects, so that way I can really just get a layout and a structure down on my page in order to proceed and make corrections and add details to the drawing. So next, I'm going to show you the shape and line groups, and then I'm going to actually show you how to use them to draw a more complicated object. Okay, so here you can see I've laid out our major shape groups and our line groups, and the way that I like to think of these groups is that they're similar to families. The shapes might look similar, but they're not identical, but I just sort of group them together to keep things very simple, and that way you aren't, overwhelmed trying to break down a shape into maybe 6 different groups. Here you've only got 3 of the shape groups. So our first group is the circle oval group, and you just want to think about it like you might have solid shapes or complete shapes, or you might have partial shapes. They might vary in size. Our second group is the square rectangle group. So again, those might vary in size. They might be solid or open. They might be partial rectangles. They might be missing one leg of one of those shapes, but you're going to sort of be looking at the object for, is there an open rectangle here? Is there a solid rectangle here? Third group is our triangle, and I like to think of it as an open angle group, because a lot of times when you're drawing animals, you're going to have open sort of triangles for either ear shapes, or they might be a little bit of a curved triangle. So those are our shape groups, and usually what I do is I start by looking at the object that I'm going to be drawing, and I look for my major shapes first. If I can't break some of those shapes down into these 3 groups, then I'm just going to break it down further into the line groups. So there you've got your straight lines and your curved lines. So sometimes it's when you have a more complex object, and sometimes it's when you're connecting 2 groups. Next, what I want to show you is how to use these shape groups and line groups to draw an object, and I'm going to draw a panda bear for you. When using shape and line groups, the first thing that I want you to do, and I'm going to use this example of a little panda bear toy over here. The first thing that I want you to do is draw the biggest parts first, and then the medium parts, and then we'll add the details, but we're going to be looking for our shape groups first with the largest parts. And the idea is that if I can't get the largest parts and the medium parts and the small sort of areas of form to conform to one of these shape groups, then I'm going to break it down even further into my straight lines or curved lines to fill in those gaps. So let me go ahead and start a drawing, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So when I'm looking at my panda bear, the largest section of the panda bear is going to be the body, and you could break it up into the black versus the white parts, but I like to see it more as a solid form instead. So my largest part is going to be the body, and I'm going to draw that like it's an oval. I'm aware that that's not exactly the shape of the body. However, I'm just going to sort of relate it to that shape because it's the closest of my shape groups, and I'm going to be able to add in detail later. The next thing I'm going to do is the medium parts, which I consider the head and the legs to be. So with the head, I see that there's sort of a triangle bump right here. And then I see the neck like it's a rectangle, maybe with some curved lines defining the edges of the rectangle, but that's sort of a start. And then I'm going to break the head down into smaller shapes. So I see a larger oval, and then I see sort of a curved triangle for the nose. Now these might not be perfect. The proportions might be a little bit off. The placement might be a little bit off, but I'm going to just get something down to start with so that then I can make corrections to it. The next segment that I'm going to do is the front leg, and I'm going to just sort of block that in, and I see that like it's a rectangle. There are more details to it, and of course I'm going to add that when I go back to it, but just to start with, I'm going to add in a rectangle, and then I'm going to draw a line so that I know how long the back leg needs to be. The back leg, I see it sort of like there's a triangle here, doesn't come to a point, and then there's a rectangle that comes forward, and maybe another rectangle that adds on to it. So you can see how I'm taking a large shape and breaking it down into simpler shapes. And then I'm going to block in the back leg, which looks like it comes in right about at this curve, and it kind of looks like a triangle shape for me. So this is sort of the basics of the panda bear, and now I can add in the small details and the lumps and the bumps and things that make it really look like a panda bear. So in order to do that, first thing I'm going to do is look at my proportion and see if I need to make any changes. I think the neck is a little bit long, so I'm going to make that change and see if I want to bring the head in a little bit closer. So then I'm going to move in the nose a little bit closer too, and then I can take an eraser and erase those changes if they're distracting. The other thing that you can erase at this time are what I call the connector lines. So you can see this line between the nose and the head. That doesn't actually exist, so you can erase that. The connector line between the neck and the body doesn't exist, so I can erase that. And I'm going to make his neck a little bit wider. And then I'm going to go in and draw some of the more specific shapes that I'm seeing. I also think that I tend to have this problem. I made the belly a little bit long. So before I go in and add in any details, I'm going to just copy this shape of the back leg and move it forward. And then I can take out the first back leg, add in that leg, and shorten the tush up a little bit because I think my proportions were a little bit off. So you can see I'm always putting in my new correct line first, and then I'm adding in, or I'm erasing the original line that isn't correct. So now that spacing looks a little bit more appropriate. I think this one could be back just a little bit farther. So again, I put in the new line, erase the old line, and then that's looking a little bit more proportionate to me. Okay, so now I'm going to add in those details. So I see this kind of moves over the back arches and comes down. There's a little bump for the tail. The tush kind of curves around, and I can add in that half oval for the back leg. And then I like to smooth out my shapes so that they look more realistic, because a panda bear isn't going to be all blocked out like that. It's not going to look robotic. It's going to be a little bit more organic. And then I can add in the other details. I can also erase any connector lines or any of the boxed lines that look kind of off. Okay, so now that I have the body and the placement of the medium parts in the spot that I want, now I'm going to add the details. So I can see that there's one ear that looks sort of like maybe like an oval with a straight line attaching it to the head. This ear looks like almost like a triangle with a curve at the bottom. The patch for the eye looks like an oval that's a little bit wider at the bottom. And then I can see just the little tip of the nose and the mouth. Okay, so looking back at my shapes, I had an oval for the body, a rectangle for the leg. I had a triangle, a rectangle, and a rectangle for the other leg, a rectangle for the neck, a triangle for the bump, an oval, a curved triangle. So you can see how I'm using mostly shape groups, but every once in a while I can use a line group to fill in. So there is an example of how to use those shape and line groups, and I hope that that really helps you to take a more complicated shape and make it simpler to do. Thank you all so much for watching. More videos are coming soon, so if you wish to subscribe to my channel, go ahead and do that. And also you can check out my website, lzmstudio.com.